Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Again, I'm very grateful to speak to this great pianist, Alberto Sanna. You know him from Authentic Sound, and I really enjoy his recordings. And, I have to say, I mean, the last year I've been listening to people like Wolfgang Weller, Wim Winters, Alberto Sanna, and I've gotten a lot of heat for this. I've gotten a lot of grief, but there's something compelling about this. I think these guys are onto something. And I think we should have an open mind, because there's something in here, especially if you look at like the romantic repertoire. I love Chopin. I'm a huge fan of Chopin. And I notice a lot of people play the slow movements automatically in whole beat. It just automatically, they don't think about it. They would never follow the metronome markings for the andante movements. So anyway, there's a lot of us for us to get into that. I think that's very exciting. And so Alberto, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
There's a lot of controversial topics on the channel. I mean, not everyone is into hexachordal solfeggio. Not everyone is into partimento. But I think this might be the most heated one. And it's so interesting. It's just another, to me, anyway,
Understandably so, I will say, because you change tempo, you change everything.
Right. But for me, it's a musicological question, and but people get so angry and heated, and you use words that you normally would never use if you met someone face to face. It's so harsh on the internet, but that's just the way it is, I guess. But anyway, I want to discuss this because there are a lot of things that I find compelling in it, and we can chat about that. So Alberto, you have a very interesting story. Why don't you just give a brief introduction to yourself? You've done that a few times on your channel, but for my listeners, why don't you just describe yourself and give a little of your background?
Okay, so I come from Italy. I'm 28 years old now as we speak, and I am raised as a mainstream Steinway pianist, modern pianist. So in my entire career of studies, I was never involved with fortepianos or early music movement or historical performance practice. So this is something that came later in my musical life. Actually came with my collaboration with Wim and Authentic Sound.
Right.
So I basically I've done my studies normally. So I studied for 4 years in the United States at Colburn School, Los Angeles, where I did my bachelor. And then I had my master degree in the Brussels Conservatory, the Flemish Conservatory, I should say. Yeah, that's, as people can see, this is from the Los Angeles days. I think this one was 2018. And so, that's a little bit my background as a modern pianist. So I had the chance to study with with great teachers in prestigious schools. So I had the possibility also to experience the top of that world in a sense. I mean, I also, the way I was raised as a pianist, it was also, to compete in important competitions. So if people go,
Italy is 10 years, right? In the conservatory, 10 years of solid piano playing, just
10
repertoire.
years in Italy. So I finished the conservatory when I was 17. I was still pretty young, and so before.
Is that? And can I ask? Is that like an? Forgive me if I don't know, but do you go to regular school and then you go to conservatory at the same time, or is it just?
So I went to regular school. But at that time in Italy, you had the old program, which means that you could access to conservatory even without an high school degree. And so that's how today it's not possible anymore. And so I ended my studies in 2012. I was still 17, and meanwhile I was already there was a teacher who wanted to study wanted me in his class in Berlin at Hans Eisler, but I didn't have yet my high school diploma. And so I had to wait 2 more years before I went to live in Berlin, and then I followed this teacher in the United States, and then I studied with him for the entirety of my bachelor. And then when I finished, I came back to Europe, and that was 2019, the end of 2019, and that's when I started my collaboration with Wim Winters. And that's actually was my front door with the introduction to the hip movement, early music movement, the idea of playing on historical pianos and clavichords. So it was a world that never actually existed in my life before. And at the same time, I did my master's in Brussels. So I did the two things at the same time. So now I'm finished with my studies at conservatory since last year. And now I'm just making a life out of teaching. And of course, my collaboration with Wim continues as it never stopped since 4 years now.
Right. Now, can I ask you, now you did your master's, right? Do you have to, because it's quite nice, at least in the master's, you can kind of choose your program. You have the choice. I want to do this particular thing. So you have a lot more freedom. I know in an undergraduate degree, you're locked in. There's something you might have to do. You have to do this, you have to do that. You won't even pass if you don't, for instance, I understand you had some conflict, some friction with some of your teachers because of this whole issue of tempo, right? There was a few, so it could be difficult,
not even because of the issue of tempo, just because of asking questions. That was enough to create some friction in the world. And with the sense of years, I also understand that it's maybe it's normal. I don't know. I'm not there to judge. But
can I also just one more question, Alberto, which is
sure.
You went through the traditional path. Is there this sense that the competition is at the end of it? Like you have to prove yourself in some kind of competition as a mainstream classical concert pianist? Is that in the back of the mind of a performer?
Fortunately, I experienced also other ways that like music schools or conservatories. They are not all like that, but of course I've been in the top conservatories in the world, like Colburn School is still today. It's a new school, but it's one of the most important music conservatories in the United States. And also I entered at the beginning Hans Eisler in Berlin, which is also one of the most important European conservatories. So in these schools where there are like very high level musicians, then the competition is regarded as something that you should entering the world of competitions and
to be taken seriously in your career. Is that sort of like how it's viewed? Like if you want to be taken seriously, to be a winner?
That's something you are. I was kind of expected to do that as well, to go to competitions and to become a concert pianist and be on stage, these kind of things. So it's part of like what people and also institutions expected from my studies.
Well, here's another thing, which is I know that with regard to competitions, I uploaded a clip on my old channel with Horowitz, who was not a fan of competitions. He said there's a lot of political kind of some of the judges choose their students. They might not choose certain other students. It's not all. He claimed it was not always clean at competitions. And but here's the bigger question, which is the career for a concert pianist now, today, 2023. It's not it's really not like it was in Horowitz's or all those famous pianists back then. It's very hard now to get any attention just playing music, especially even if you play very well according to these concert pianists. Who's going to go into the theater? It's very difficult. You need some kind of angle or something, or good management. It's very tough, and there's thousands of people graduating with these degrees, and what do they do? Most of them become teachers, which I think is great. But again, the general career of a concert pianist, it doesn't seem to be very viable.
Well, the problems, I see two main problems with competitions today. The first one is that you as a student, I mean, you have to participate in the early part of your career. So until your early 30s, let's say so.
Right.
And in that regard, when you are preparing a competition, there's very little margin that you have to build your musical personality, your musical who you will be in the future as a musician, the things that you want to research, and if you eventually come to different results, those are things that do not matter in a competition. You are expected to have a certain standard interpretation and nothing. I mean, you can have little difference here and there, but we are talking about minor things, and anything like what I do wouldn't be absolutely, it would be a no-brainer, like nobody will upset that. But
you can't be like Pogorelic,
yeah.
Pogorelic, you can, but eventually he played like very slow performances, I think and then that would just, you would crash out of a competition, right, if you did that.
You might have examples like this. There might be other people. I don't follow the world of competitions much, but I can understand that in certain cases with a nice jury, not with a nice jury, but with the right circumstances, like some personalities can maybe not win the competition, but they can be noticed. Like Pogorelic didn't win the Chopin's competition, I believe, but like he was noticed. Martha Argerich made a huge case for him.
Right.
So that's history. The other problem is that on the other side, like this thing that to participate, to get to the finals of a competition, you have to accept a certain standard interpretation. This brings to an homologation, homogenization, I don't know how you say in English, but homologation. So everyone sounds very, I mean, you can hear like a good set of 20 appassionatas, and you can be sure that most of them will be pretty much the same. You might have some little things here and there, but like we can agree that the standard floor it's the same for everyone. And so when you have so many pianists at this high level, because we have to be honest, they are all like at the highest level, like
right, because you have to be like a sports person in a way, right? You got to be like,
and it's not like it's not even like
good
in
physique,
where you can
good memory.
Actually, you cannot measure their performance. So it comes to I don't know, something like at that point a taste. But you see the point that these people, like the candidates in competitions, they actually do not have the opportunity of focusing on developing their personalities. They are there and they have to, in a way, do what they are expected to do. And so this creates a world where you have just look at now like how many pianists you have that can play Rachmaninoff 3 and they do all it like at a CD level. And so in the music industry, like if you're a manager or like you just have a lot of offering, you don't even have to choose. Like anybody anybody is fighting to have a small spot to play on a stage, and you have millions of pianists, and so that's where we are right now. The good thing is that competitions are not anymore like something that you should necessarily do to build your career. Now we have social medias and already in the 20th century, like not all the greatest pianists that we know as part of history today did competitions.
Back in the day, right? If you won, like for instance, the Van Cliburn or some, or like your name would be on New York City's sticker. You'd be like you would have a parade on the street if your country would be like, wow, you won something. Now it's just it's not, doesn't have that same sort of effect. Like it's changed, and that's why whenever I see some people say that you have to diversify your career because you cannot expect that you're going to be playing Chopin etudes at recitals. No one's going to go and see this. I mean, no one's going to purchase tickets for this. It's very difficult unless you find a good manager or like you said, social media and all that thing. So again, there's that huge issue with that. This really ties to what we're going to talk about, which is whole beat, the metronome principle, because this is one of the biggest things that people talk about, which is we have recordings of the students of the student of Chopin, or Liszt's, the student of Liszt. We have their recordings and they're all fast, with the exception to Raoul Pugno. They're mostly fast, right? And I can perfectly believe that there is a change in the performance practice of the turn of the century. Especially with radio and the big wax cylinders and things starting to happen where people are recording. And you can let me know of your perspective, Alberto. I'd really like to know. Let's say you're not a rich person, but you're a young, hungry pianist in the turn of the 20th century. You don't have a lot of money, but you know that you can play fast, you can excite the crowd. Maybe you could go to Carnegie Hall with your octaves and you can wow everyone. And if I told you, don't do that, play slow, and no, but people will think you're not so fast. Don't you think there'll be pressure knowing that the other guy is going really fast and everyone's calling him a genius because he's so fast? And I can totally believe that the speed level would just go crazy because there's this war, this like arms race of virtuosos. I mean, modern virtuoso, I use the term. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way, like musicians at the end of 19th century were not judged based on how strictly they followed the intentions of the composer, and they had to make, as you said, a living out of that. And so, one of the easy way to distinguish yourself from your colleagues is if you are able to demonstrate it to an audience of not necessarily like people who know anything about Beethoven, etc., that you are just capable of doing things at the piano that other people are not, and that you can do with demonstrating your amazing speed and technique. But that's something else from being. So one thing is being a musician who wants to reconstruct the intention of the composers. One other thing is to be a pianist who wants to be on stage and show off for people. So those are two different things, and we should be aware of the difference.
Right. Did you? I have two biographies of Vladimir Horowitz, and I know there's a distinct impression of him when he burst on the scene, where it's, wow, he doesn't make any mistakes. Like he's not just fast, but he's CD quality, when he was just coming out. I remember there was an impression, oh, the older pianists used to make tons of mistakes, or they used to or if you look at an old recording of a 19th century pianist, they could, I don't know, they weren't, there was no CDs, there was nothing to record. So I mean, it was more of how you can, they didn't have that worry, that pressure. And it's kind of sad. I know that reading at the end of the book, he retired 3 times, Horowitz. There's this pressure of maintaining this romantic illusion of this, this deity almost, this perfect virtuoso that. And I can totally understand why you might want to run away from the concert stage after a certain while, because it's just so demanding on someone's psyche.
Yeah, I mean, also without mentioning the huge problems that it's not really spoken out today of injuries for musicians, both physical injuries and also mental. I mean, I've been part of those conservatories. I witnessed that with my colleagues. I mean, I was lucky; I never had anything.
Can you give an example? You don't have to, of course, don't mention anyone, but can you give an example of injuries?
I mean, many colleagues that just had a tendinitis when it comes to physical problems, inflammations. At that point, they had to stop for a while, go to therapy, to a physiotherapist. This is when you have physical problems, without mentioning like all the other things of depression, anxiety, stress. So those are things that are part, and they are. The sad thing is that they are generally accepted as part of being a musician today. And what I would like to see more is somebody raising their hand and say, guys, this is music, we should just enjoy this, and this doesn't make any sense that a musician has to practice the same piece for years, not to be there where he's expected to be, and also getting like all these sort of problems, physical and psychological problems. And so this is something that we should really like address in the future. Also music schools, how is that possible? The conservatories have also always a psychologist, and I mean we are like almost as athletes, but I will say that's pretty far from being like a musician who wants to play Mozart, Beethoven, and their music wasn't meant to be for that kind of use, you know. And so we should put on the table these topics and discuss that again with schools, like what options do we have. So
I do agree with some people who say that some traditions can be maintained, but it really depends. I mean, you can't just say that for everything. Like, for instance, there's the minuet, right? There's a very nice quote in Professor Robert Yerdigan's Music in the Galant Style. He was quoting from a literature, and he was saying that, why did the minuet disappear? The dance disappeared. Well, because when the aristocrats disappeared, the minuet disappeared. Just as simple as that. That world vanished. And so in that regard, I can totally understand that world, the early 19th century, really even up to Raoul Pugno, that world was really in flux. Could we talk about that Moscheles? Like, you found sources by Moscheles. Now, is it true that he said that when he was sitting on a train that was going, 20, 30 miles per hour, he was going crazy? Is that what he said?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I know that quote. I should see that again. But like, it ties very well to the idea of perception of speed today, especially. I mean, one of the things that people say when they hear for the first time the musical outcome of the tempi that we take in whole beat is, but I don't feel the allegro. The allegro is fast. It doesn't feel fast at all. The question is, what are you projecting 2 centuries ago as what fast? Because guess what? Today for us, fast, what can it be fast? The space shuttle. But at the time, fast could have been like a fast. I mean, the carriage pulled by horses. So we should always be very careful in projecting what we feel as fast or slow in history, especially when we talk about people who lived 200 years ago, even more. And so we cannot just assume that it was the same. They
didn't have electricity. I mean, electricity, never mind like cell phones and social media and the internet. No electricity, horse and carriage. I mean, that's a completely different world. People are lamenting the days that we didn't have cell phones. You know, can you imagine? Like, it was such a different world. We didn't have cell phones. Well, what about horse and carriage? I mean, come on. So, but let's talk a little bit about specifics now. Okay, so I want to talk about specifics. You're a great player. You're a player. You're an actual player, which is very helpful to discuss specifics in the score, because I think it should always tie to the music. Who should we start with? Should we start with Schubert, Chopin? Should we grab? Let's choose a composer.
I will say general things that we. They apply basically to most of composers of that era, especially early 19th century, even a late 18th century. I mean, it's that's where we focus mostly. But yeah, I mean, what do you want to? What would you like to address me? What would you like me to address first?
Maybe we should go chronologically, and let's start with Beethoven, because I think he was one of the, because on the channel he's the one of the older composers, right? Because you did Schubert and Chopin. So let's just jump into Beethoven. Let's not jump straight into the Hammerklavier. Let's jump into the Waldstein. And you did a great recording of this, and immediately, I think people recognize the Waldstein, the fast introduction. That's what they are conditioned to hear it. And so what was your impression? Okay, so first I think we should talk about the instrument that you played on. So actually getting it, what's it like playing it on an instrument, and on that particular instrument, and compare it with a modern piano.
So for those who do not know, that's a copy of a Johann Fritz pianoforte of 1816. The copy was made in 2019 by Joris Portfliege, Belgian clavichord builder, an organ builder, and also he made this beautiful fortepiano. And so the difference with modern piano, where do I start from? Maybe from the lightness of the instrument, which is basically what people always claim. Like these light instruments allow speeds that on a modern piano we cannot do.
Right, because they say it's got a lighter action, therefore the whole piece is going to be easy to play.
Yeah, which is actually not correct. Granted that maybe for a light scale that you have to play like this, maybe it could be easier because the weight of the keys is significantly lighter. So this piano, I think we measured that once, maybe was 36 grams compared to the modern Steinway, which is 52 grams, which is another world. But what I will say is that it wouldn't make any sense to say that these instruments are just faster, because this instrument doesn't have an aftertouch, and the aftertouch system was actually invented to have faster repetition in the piano. So in that regard, it is simply not correct to say that these instruments are faster. Plus, when you play on this instrument, you have to be very careful when you are before depressing the keys, because they are indeed so light that if you do not pay attention to where you put your hands, like you can depress a key without even noticing that. So there's no resistance. So that's also something that you should pay attention to. Plus, the size of the keys is smaller, so it's not easy as an...
Especially the black keys, right? Is that right?
The black keys are really small, and so when you are not used, the first times that I played on that instrument, it was really, really, really difficult, especially the octave size. I mean, you just have to be careful to where you have your hands. And so, and it's an instrument that is way more unforgiving. It's like the comparison is as if you would drive a car from today compared to a car from the beginning of 20th century. It's like simply the car from the 20th century barely can stay on the road if you do the wrong things. And so it's a little bit the same thing. And if you think about that, it's part of the human being logic. We build something, and mechanically speaking, we try to make it always better and better. What we should define is what mechanically better that actually means, because modern instruments have sacrificed something to have more accuracy in mechanics, tuning, etc., etc. So those instruments are actually not easy to play faster, and so I will say that's a common idea that we all have. But
it's a common criticism. But how do you react to people who say, "Okay, I don't believe you because here is a YouTube video of somebody on a fortepiano playing super fast"?
Sorry, say it again. So there's.
Let me say that. So how do you respond to people who criticize, who say, I don't believe that because here's a YouTube video of somebody on a fortepiano playing super fast, so you have to be wrong. Clearly, that this invalidates what you just said.
Tied to what we do. I mean, I'm not saying that you cannot play faster, but tied to what we do. My question is, can you play those metronome numbers in single beat? And not some of them, all of them. That's my question. And also, since people say so much, like when you're in conservatory and say, yeah, Hammerklavier, the metronome number, lighter instrument that was possible. Okay, where is the recording of the Hammerklavier in single beat? There's no recording of the Hammerklavier in single beat. Actually, in the recent study, we made a video on that, a study made by a German institution that analyzed the recordings of the Hammerklavier.
Who is the fastest?
And the fastest are the ones on modern piano. I'm sorry, but the one on early pianos are not in between the fastest. They don't even come close to the metronome number of Beethoven.
But I've heard the commenters, and I do read them because I want to be an open-minded, even to the criticism. I want to listen to all of the comments. I have to wade through them. Some of them are really mean, but some I do. They are convinced that there are people who play it perfectly in single beat. Are they wrong?
Well, my question is if they checked, because if they are convinced, it's not enough for me. I want to see I want to see people playing with them like those recordings with a metronome ticking. And there I don't see. That's what you see in our recordings. In our recordings, you see the overlay with the metronome ticking that aligns with our playing. But I've never seen that for other recordings. I've never seen that for the Hammerklavier. I've never seen that for the entire Czerny's Opus 299, as much as many other metronome numbers that you have throughout the centuries. Plus, people will be shocked. Unfortunately, people don't know the problem. And they don't actually know. But like there are metronome numbers that are as fast as the Beethoven's and Czerny ones from the late 19th century. At that point, you didn't have Viennese fortepianos anymore.
Are we talking about Isidor Philipp?
We are talking about Isidor Philipp. We are talking about Max Reger. We are talking about Thalberg, Tausig, Hertz. Those already played on later instruments. We are talking also about Brahms.
Okay, quick question. Is the modern Steinway, what is the earliest equivalent to like the modern piano that is kind of the same?
That's a really, really good question. So, having said that, it's very hard to tell, but I tried pianos from I had the possibility to be in one of the most important piano shops in Belgium. And they have pianos from all eras, and so I tried all of them. Let's say that you start having like a feeling of being close to our instrument of today with an instrument from 1870, 1880. Right. Even the Erard of Wim, which is from 1866, as much as it's like far from the Viennese pianos, it's still not like the modern piano, you know what I mean? So that's something that people should know. Like metronome numbers pointed to in single beat to impossible speeds. Also in the era where we already had pianos that are basically as the ones that we have today. So
okay. Now I have a question about these recreated forte pianos. Are they really exactly kind of made in the same way? So you're really getting what Beethoven got essentially?
Well, that depends also from if those copy, I mean, depends who does that. This copy, I can, we can guarantee that Joris didn't compromise. So actually the other day I had the chance to see for the first time the original Fritz, which is like unusable, of course, but that's the model that he copied, and he didn't make any compromises. So we can say for this piano, we can say that it's 100% what the original was. I don't know about other instrument builders if they make any compromise or not. That's something that we should.
That's an unknown, so we have to also investigate that just to make sure. So you're saying it could be possible that somebody else's fortepiano could not be what totally authentic, essentially. It's possible.
Like building. I guess that the word of building an instrument it belongs to the like the idea of reconstructing something, and I guess you can make compromises when there are things that do not make sense. I don't know if instrument builders face that problem. I guess so, but it ties a little bit also to the world of musicians. When you decide to reconstruct a score, what data are you taking in consideration? What are you compromising? What are you not compromising on? And so there's and once you start compromising, actually it's very easy to go down the hill, because you do one and you do a second, and so every time that you face a problem, maybe you accept the easy way out. I don't know, but that's
So let's go to Chopin now. So I think what you said was absolutely right, and I agree with what you said. I want to talk. It was actually very easy for me to be compelled by this, because I mean I like for instance, let's take the Nocturnes, the Chopin Nocturnes, and I never thought too deeply until it hit me. I just realized, like, wait a second, nobody plays it at the metronome mark there. Just nobody does. It's just they don't do it. And it's the same with the Chopin Etude number 3. Where is it? I think it's number 3. The number 3, Opus 10. Everyone plays it naturally in whole beat. Naturally. No one's telling them to. In fact, no one even bothers with this. They just totally ignore it. They just totally ignore it. It's like it's not. Yeah.
Or if they do not ignore it, they use it and say, you see, people are just playing like so slow. It's not clearly not what Chopin meant. His tempo is 100, and then they play at 8 not 80.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there are some videos on YouTube of people who say, we are not like the others. We are going to take seriously Chopin's metronome number, which is 100. People play 50. It's way too slow. And then my tempo is 80. I mean, this doesn't make much sense, I would say.
Right. You
Whether
mentioned
you
number
follow
6.
his tempo or not. Imagine like you have Chopin next to you. Hey, great, I have your metronome number. I'm going to follow it, but for the sake of it, I'm just going to take 80 because I think it's better.
Right. You also mentioned number 6, right, as an example of everyone.
Number 6, it's played much slower than that metronome number. Yeah. And the funniest thing is that people say, but like if you apply the whole beat theory, slow movements become unbearably slow, when they do not realize that in the slow movements that most of times performance, when they just let their instinct go and just follow the music, it's when they get the closest to whole beat in the slow movements.
Right.
And so that's something very, very special. I will say also check Brahms' second piano concerto, third movement. The slow movement, everyone plays 30%, between 25 and 30% slower. So the real thing are the slow movements, and it doesn't surprise me that you bring up on the table the nocturnes, because those are pieces where you are not expected to show off any sort of technique. Those are not etudes, and so people just think from a perspective of making the music, and when you just take that path, you can just get close to whole beat rather than with your rationality.
Right. I personally think, I mean, objectively speaking, to play slow is extremely hard. I think it's very hard. I mean, from a musical standpoint, because you can kind of get away with speed. Speed can kind of cover up things, but when you're slow, you're so exposed. Can you talk about pedaling? Because I think pedaling is totally ignored, especially in the manuscripts. Pedaling, especially with the Beethoven. Talk about what is ignored typically in modern performance, so people can understand what's happening in the modern performance.
So let's say besides the metronome numbers that are largely ignored, I will say the pedalings and the fingerings, and also the system of accentuation. It's also very, very important, and it's the key to play in a whole beat, the accentuation. But talking about pedalings, people ignore them, not because they do not want it. So let's put these premises apart. And not all composers indicate consistently the pedalings in their scores, not always. So you start seeing that from with Beethoven from his Opus 26, his sonata in A flat major. Chopin's, we can say that safely, that he's really, really, really precise of what he wants with the pedalings.
Chopin is precise.
He's really precise.
Okay.
I can tell you, like, if you go to Schumann's or Brahms or Liszt, it's not always the case. But with Chopin, Czerny, Moschles, Bülow in his editions of Beethoven sonatas, you can tell that they are really precise. You just see a pattern. But coming back to why people do not follow in case of the etudes, it's just because if tempo changes everything, I said before. So if your interpretation is based on our standard tempi of today, I'm sorry, but the only way to play in at those tempi is that to have the pedal helping you, because what does the pedal do? It allows you to leave the key before without worrying about the accuracy of your release. And so you can just run to the next key and just play faster. That's what the pedal does. And so if these tempi are your point of departure, you cannot play the revolutionary etude the way it's written, so without pedal completely.
Right.
So that's something.
Back to the etudes, and I'll never forget this. I remember I was watching a masterclass on the Opus number 10, the etude number 10 in F major, and I remember at the end of it, like, and this is a great pianist talking about it, but I remember there's this section at the end with all these accents, and the person giving the lecture said, I really don't know why these accents are here. And
I will say, should we say ask that to Chopin? Why?
And
did you
they said
try
literally
that?
in the masterclass, he said, it's actually better if you don't play the accents, and it sounds like
thanks, Frederick. Thank you for the accent, but we don't really need those. Thank you.
Yeah, because if people are going to criticize you, say the metronome number is nothing. It's not that important. It's not everything. Okay, but now you're taking apart the accents and the score. You're basically taking away the intentions. You're taking what's next. You don't want to take away the cadences. There's a lot of things so I think that there is some problem here that the accents and other aspects of that were very meticulously written in the score. And you said, right, that, and I think this is backed up, that Chopin would agonize over his compositions, like one note or something. There's an anecdote where he just agonized and then he would change it, and then he would change it back. So he's that sort of composer. So when we have that in mind, now, of course, all of this is speculation, and I don't want people to think that this is the final thing. But I think it's quite compelling to say that if you dismiss certain things, it's less compelling that you're actually trying to recreate as it was intended. Oh, yeah, actually.
Actually, the fact that he agonized and worked a lot because he was obsessed with writing down what he wanted should be a plus for us to take what he says seriously, and not to say the opposite. He agonized, he doubted all the time, so maybe that, he would have changed the mind. No, it's actually the opposite. He worked a lot because he knew once he had the publication that was out in the world, and that he wanted to be sure that was what he wanted people to do for his music. So we better take that seriously. And the point is,
all the accents, even in the number one. The number one has the accents. You never hear them.
The point is, everything is possible. He didn't write impossible things. Otherwise, we would have to assume that the guy was just out of his mind and he didn't know what.
Okay. That's a great, because we hear that as well, which is these were the greatest virtuosos, and they were the harbinger of a new form of piano playing. These are the geniuses, and so they were writing these pieces to either stamp their authority, or they were writing it for the highest level of piano playing, and this was not at all for. So what do you comment to that?
Well,
With people?
first of all,
yeah, go ahead.
Let's define the word virtuoso in the context of the time. Because if you compare Chopin's music to what was Mozart's music, then yes, I mean, technically Chopin does things that in the Mozart sonata you can only dream about. So but he was coming from that. He wasn't coming from the Rachmaninoff's era. So already that puts us in a perspective where we should be really careful of projecting our idea of virtuoso at the time. Second, Chopin wasn't considered at the time to be the virtuoso in the sense of the Liszt or Alkan sense. He was regarded as a great pianist, but because he was an excellent improviser and with a touch, everyone they speak about his playing, they speak about his touch, his way of pedaling. They say, oh, Chopin's pedaling is just amazing. Okay, then why don't we take that seriously? Do we want to reconstruct that? The point is, it is only possible when you apply the only condition that you need, the right tempo. Right tempo allows you to reconstruct everything: the accents, the fingerings, the pedalings, the agogical accentuation, everything. The message of the music. The message, so it's the character.
Do we have Chopin's
imagine you would hear you listen to the Bohemian Rhapsody twice as fast. What would you say?
It would be absurd. Okay, so fingering is interesting because I've looked at both sides, and is the first edition. The first edition must be Chopin's fingerings, I think, right?
Yeah,
in the Paris.
It is.
Okay,
it is.
Then I know was it Mikuli or Matthias? Somebody said fingering is not as important as I don't know. This is not as important as. So they changed the fingering essentially in their edition. I don't know if it's Mikuli or something.
So what Mikuli, as I should go back to that, but if I remember correctly from the editions that he makes, he specifically says that his fingerings are his fingerings, but they are in a way in line with the Chopin's tradition. So it's not that we are talking about somebody who is just imposing his fingering system. So that we should be aware of. Plus, whether if those fingerings were important or not, it's not really the point of the matter. The point is those fingerings have been written at a certain point in history in the score, which means that for the composer, those fingerings were possible. And the question is, are we actually able to do that or not? And if not, why? And if yes, at what conditions? So that's the point. Whether it's important or not, I would say, to me, it's important because having it gives you also the idea of the legato that they had, because when you find a legato under a slur, I can show you some example if you want, under a slur with 555 or 111 without pedal. So the question comes, like, what was legato at the time? Can we reconstruct that? But whether it is important or not, it just gives you an idea of what they did. After, it's up to the performer. It's his responsibility to do whatever he wants. He's free. We live in a free world to do whatever he wants. But if you decide that you want to apply what's in the score, then you should find the solutions yourself. So
okay, now I want to talk about Octave Glissandos. I saw that comment. It's like, hey, Czerny said this about Octave Glissandos, therefore you're wrong. So everything is invalidated because of that. So why don't you address that? What did Czerny say about Octave Glissandos, and how does that apply to the performance of Beethoven's sonatas?
That's one of the most interesting topics, because there are, as long as we know, there are two ways of defining the glissando. And one, it's not necessarily the thing of sliding on the keys, but like doing a sort of, like portamento with your wrist. Don't quote me on that. It's not even the matter. The matter is, okay, if that is your proof to say that those metronome numbers are clearly meant to be in single beat, again, let's go back to question number 1. Can you demonstrate that at the piano? And if not, do we have a problem? And if we have a problem, what solution do we have? So we always have to approach these things from the right perspective. And so if your only solution to apply those metronome numbers is the whole beat, then when you encounter the definition of glissando, you should try to analyze that from the perspective that allows you to solve the problems, not that restores the problems. Okay, but it's a really nice question, which we don't have a real answer.
Right.
Like it could be maybe that it was delineated sliding. We don't know, but there are also there's another description.
In the piece that calls for it, can you play it both ways?
Potentially, I never tried to do the glissando there. I just did that. It's called, I think we talked a long time ago, but it was something like a gliding, and something that you do with your wrist. So your wrist allows you to have a soft release and to just smoothly go through the octaves, but not that you slide laterally on the side of the key. So that's something really interesting, and which we don't really have an answer yet to that, and it's something that should be absolutely studied. I would say it's a future topic, as many others.
Now, I can't believe I missed this one, but I think it's a major one, which is Italian tempo markings. I think that's huge because you hear it in this doesn't sound like vivace, or it doesn't sound like allegro con brio con fuoco. It doesn't sound like this. So, and I was, of course, surprised when I looked at the definition of these things. They were not the same by any stretch. They were not uniform. Yeah. They meant different things to different people.
But again, sorry, I'm sorry for being probably very boring and sounding really, really boring. But that's no argument. I don't care what it sounds to you, not you personally, but to these people. I don't care what to them sounds fast or not. The only thing that I care is to solve the metronome problem, and I have only one solution, unless they can demonstrate that in single beat. Then, if we really want to talk about the Italian tempo words, fast in relation to what? Because guess what? Fast in a cut time, in a alla breve notation, and fast in a 4 common time with 16 notes are not the same thing in terms of absolute speed, because if you calculate the speed of the quarter notes can double, and it's still one is fast and the other one is fast too. So the Italian tempo words are related to the notation, and that's something that musicians do not look at. What does the notation tell you? What's your facet note value? What's the structural note value? What's the time signature? What's the harmonic pattern? Meaning, how many changes of harmony per bar do you have? Do you have 4 per bar, or do you have 1 per bar? Well, that has an influence on tempo as well. So those are that is just to show to people that defining a tempo is something really hard, at the same time crucial. It makes it are the walls of your building. They decided what you are going to have inside their building. Are you going to have a 30 square meter bathroom, or are you going to have a 10 square meters bathroom? But it's exactly that. That's the logic. And so that's what we mean when we say, we say that until the end of the day, tempo sets all the other parameters of your performance.
I noticed that in Baroque music, like Bach, no one, it's the heatedness is less, because there's because there's no metronome marking. And so if you play it super fast, you play it super slow, everyone is like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. It doesn't matter.
Well, but also there, I mean, you cannot, I mean, you don't have metronome numbers, but there's the concept of the tempi ordinario, which is not on discussion.
Let's talk about that. That's a huge one. That's a huge one. I mean, another, because I really do try to look for all the criticism. I try to parse through all the comments and really look for good criticism, which is like, for instance, they say that tempo ordinario talk to a pendulum. Are you kidding me? I mean, like, clearly that died in the Renaissance or in the Middle Ages. All of these terms. I mean, I was so amazed when I learned through hexachordal solfeggio that they were still singing plain chant.
I would say
in Italy into the 19th century. So why is it such a stretch that thinking in terms of pendulums and tactus would somehow maintain some sort of lineage into the 18th and 19th century?
If a teacher will tell me like clearly they died my answer will be like clearly I don't see that. Can you show me some quotes? Can you provide me some context, because I don't see that clearly, because it's like history doesn't work in boxes. There's a line through generations.
The flag, the Baroque is over. Now the classical period.
Yeah, I mean,
now the romantic.
I mean, we can speculate as long as we want about Beethoven living in his world, separated from Haydn, separated from Mozart, which didn't know anything about Bach, Handel, and so on. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. These people had studied those works. They came from that. I mean, Beethoven's teacher was a second generation Bach student, Neffe. Beethoven studied the entire well-tempered clavier when he was young. So we cannot think about these composers as independent reality that didn't talk to their colleagues or didn't confront themselves with the past. That's just how it works.
Right. Let's talk about tempo ordinario, because I mean, who has heard of that? I mean, let's be honest. Like, but it's like if you go, then I know all the criticisms. If I search on Google, all I find is authentic sound. Well, if you search for hexachordal solfeggio, all you'll find is maybe Professor Nicholas Baragwanath or you'll find there's not. Sometimes you can't find stuff, and you're looking for stuff, even in the age of the internet. I remember I was looking for a Charles Burney, the best fugue improviser in Italy, Matteo Collista. One page with like just his birth date and his death date. That's it. And this is who Charles Burney said was the best.
Not relevant.
The best fugue improviser in Italy. That in the 18th century. Couldn't find anything on the guy. So I mean, like that's not a compelling argument. I mean, I'm going to be open to arguments, but that's not so compelling. Okay, so how do you determine tempos for, like, what is the tempo ordinario? Define it, and like how do we look at a score? Maybe it might not have Mazel's metronome number. How do we determine this tempo from the notes itself and all the information that we see in the score?
Well, that's a really complex topic, and I'm not even like the specialist of this. But let's start from what I know. So let's say that people should know that the tempi ordinari, because also we talk about tempo ordinario, but like there are multiple tempi ordinari, I guess. So they are standard tempi where you assign a certain duration to a note value in a certain time signature with a certain Italian tempo indication. So, for example, still in the 19th century, deep in the 19th century, the concept of tempo ordinario in 4/4. It's like you assign the second to the quarter note if you have 16 notes as structural note value. And if you look at the metronome numbers, they always start from a quarter note 120, exactly twice as fast. So this idea of tempo ordinario was something still alive until deep in the 19th century, and it comes from a long time before. And so that's how also you build your interpretation. I mean, on works that are not metronomized. So you were talking about Bach. So we don't have clearly any metronomization or
Yeah.
any pendulumization, I will say, by Bach. But the system applies, so you know that you take the notation, you take the fastest note values, you look if there's any particular ornamentation, because that determines your tempo as well, any particular articulation. So these are the things, but you start always from that idea of tempo ordinario. And so guess what? If your structural note values are 8 note, maybe your allegro can be a little bit faster than the second. Or maybe if you have 13 second notes, that means that you have to slow your tempo from the standard 60 quarter note, and so you go a little bit slower. Why so? Because the principle is that you should be able to play a piece without any tempo change, unless it's indicated, of course. But if there are no tempo change indications, you should be able to play any passage, even the most difficult ones, the fastest ones, without changing your tempo. And that's something that doesn't really belong anymore to our current way of playing. And that's why we don't come to the same idea of tempi, because guess what? You can go as fast as you can, and when you have the first difficult passage, we call upon the so-called tempo rubato, which is not that, of course, but it's, so to say, the handbrake to just slow down, because otherwise you cannot play that difficult passage at the same tempo. So that's a little bit the idea.
Yeah, I know, like, I remember there was a theorist, a German theorist, Heinrich Koch, and there was a great guest I had who came on and talked about him, but more of his analysis. But I was looking at some articles just today, actually, about tactus, and they said that the first half of the 18th century, maybe this was just Germany, but they had a particular way of considering metrical ideas, tempo, and that sort of thing. It was, and they said in the article that the Koch had a particular early 18th century way of tempo that shifted. So it's not out of the realm of imagination.
You see an evolution in tempi. That's something true. Like if you go to the 19th century, and then you see the difference between the Melzel treatise on metronome and the Quantz in 1754, something like that. And you see that an allegro in 1820 is faster than an allegro with the same notation at Quantz time. So in that regard, yes, there is an evolution, but there's no a disconnection. That's what people sometimes think.
Massive.
There is something like just a total breakup in history, a separation, and from tomorrow a new world. No, it doesn't work like this. There was an evolution, clearly. So maybe like what you find in the 19th century, that an allegro is more on a half note 80, whereas like in the 18th century is still like slower, but still connected to the same idea. So that's very interesting, actually.
Was that source Fink who complained about Mozart being butchered, and so that was the
Fink Tomacek story? That's one of the most beautiful stories, because also you see there, I mean, what these critics from the past, what they actually thought of those so-called virtuosos who took the music of these composers, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, and you name it, to just show off. And these critics were not particularly happy about that, and say you are destroying the sense of truth that comes from authenticity that comes from this music, just to dazzle the audience, at the point that even the audience at a certain point in history loses the perception of what's wrong and what's right.
Yeah.
So
I think the Charles Marie Widor anecdote from his biography, where he said that he just saw someone who has the lineage. His father was the Haydn symphony that he conducted was like half the tempo, and I mean that. So I find it, so when I hear criticism that there's zero evidence, I mean, that's a very strong sort of line to take. How can you say
there's
there's
absolutely
zero?
100% evidence, and the evidence
opposite is true. There's tons.
was
There
when
seems to be a
people
lot.
say that. When people say that, it's basically. I mean, of course, there's no. It's true that it's not true that there's no evidence. If you go through all these sources, you have to reconstruct an historical context, and you cannot. It's documented that these people could play faster than those metronome numbers that we today find impossible. So you have to give me an explanation on that. But
Right.
even if we wouldn't have anything like this, no, imagine we don't have any sources, any text, nothing. We just have the metronome numbers.
stands, yeah.
The metronome numbers are the source, because they are meant as precise tempo indications that should be played. So if with single beat you cannot play it, and with whole beat you can play all of them, discussion is over. That's your source. That's your
Okay.
source.
Alkan. So I feel that's a comment that people say triumphantly. It's over. It's over. Alkan gave the timings. It's over. Like Vince Carter. It's over. So like, what do you say to that? What is that criticism? Alkan gave timings. So you're wrong.
Yeah, my same question. Can you show to me at the piano? Can you sit, take the score, put the metronome ticking, and play it? And if not, why?
But then they would say to you, it doesn't matter because those timings
Yes, it does.
are
Because
the
yes, it
timings
does,
just
because
so.
you have
Obviously,
you
it
have
happened
his
because the
metronome
timings are
numbers.
there.
Yes, because you have his metronome number. You have to be able to play it. If those timings confirm the validity of the metronome number in single beat, then you must play the metronome number in single beat with the metronome ticking. And if not, you have to acknowledge that there is a problem. And if there is a problem, you have to search a solution. That's how research works. And we can say, but the timings, you have to find an explanation. And the explanation to that, it could very well be that those timings were calculated on a metronome number. And guess what? If your metronome number is in single beat, your duration will be in single beat. But then we come back to the same problem. You must be able to play it. There's no discussion.
I don't know, but I think, I'm just guessing, but I'm sure they would say, this guy on YouTube, I haven't personally looked, but like this guy can play Alkan in single beat.
Is there somebody?
I haven't seen it.
Is
but,
there?
To be fair, I haven't investigated it, but maybe somebody in the comment section would say clearly there are people, the super virtuosos of today.
Again,
Marc-Andre Hamelin.
We go back to my question of before. Did they actually check it with a metronome at hand, or they are just saying that because they hear something super fast and they think that that's
okay? So what you're saying is that we need to really actually look at the performance.
We have to measure, and by measure I mean you have to sit at the piano and play with a metronome ticking with your playing. And if you're not able to do that, if you're not able to pull out up to 30 notes per second, whereas our world record today, up-to-date Guinness World Record is, I think, 15 notes per second, then you have a problem. Apparently, Alkan can do 30 notes per second.
Is that right? 30 in the score.
We are in the book. In the book, we will have a list of 200 pieces from at least 50 different composers of the 19th century that metronomized works. And if you think that the highest notes speed documented is up to 15 at the end of 19th century for a short scale like this, and then you see these scores, and the vast majority starts from a minimum of 12 notes per second up to 30 notes per second. Then maybe they were able, I don't know, but if they were able, we should be able as well. And if we are not, we should find an explanation.
I read what some people were saying, that you can actually get really high notes per second for certain short ornamental passages. Is that true?
Yeah, you can get up to, that's documented in history, you can arrive to 15 notes per second if you have to play a shorter run. Vroom. like this. And guess what? Czerny in a Beethoven sonatas asks you to play exactly in strict tempo indicates by him 30 notes per second. It doesn't make any sense unless you divide that number by 2 and magically it becomes 15. So nothing changed in our system since those days. We are still human beings and that we can do.
Are there any problematic... someone has said that Isidor Philipp is hard even in whole beat. There's some things that are difficult.
It is. I mean, there are pieces that are just crazy in whole beat. I mean, I've seen some Kalkbrenner etudes that are just insane. Some Hertz, Tausig, Dreischock.
And the question is, are they though impossible in whole beat?
No, not impossible.
But they're just extremely hard then.
They're extremely hard.
Okay.
I mean, those were the top virtuosos of the time. Of course, they did write some really hard stuff. I mean, just go to the school of virtuosos of Czerny. Like it's just insane. It's very, very hard. I will have to practice that, but I can. But like at the end, you can play it, but only in one way.
Right. Well, I mean,
I'm sorry. Like people just detest us for being so hard on that, but it's just the reality. The problem is actually that people don't know the problem itself, and that's why the book that will be published next year will be dedicated for 1/3 to just show to people over and over, because we have to accept, and the list that we will have in the book is exactly that. Yeah. You say, people today think, it's Beethoven's broken metronome. Schumann was crazy. Only 2 of them. Guess what? I have a selection, and I want to highlight the word selection of at least 50, 60 different composers. Not to say that there are way more, and they all had exactly the same problem. From all the century, fortepianos, modern pianos, you name it. You can pick whatever you want. I let you choose.
I find it very interesting, very, very interesting, this topic. I find a lot of the information compelling. People were shocked in my last interview. I asked Wim, Rachmaninoff, single beat, whole beat? Whole beat. Tchaikovsky, whole beat. Whole beat. So, is Brahms whole beat? I never asked, but is he single beat or whole beat?
Well, having said that, Brahms didn't leave us many metronome numbers. So we have metronome numbers for his second piano concerto, the first movement of the first piano concerto, even if not published, his first piano trio, the B major, I think. And I think also another piano trio. But having said that, yes, they are in a whole beat, those works. Because, unless somebody... first of all, they are totally in line with the tempi ordinari, because he writes a waltz in half dot in note 76, which is totally in line with the tempo of a waltz. Plus, if you can play 33 notes per second, I don't know. Maybe Brahms could, maybe was the only one of his era. I don't know. I certainly cannot.
Are there any single beat composers that were like firmly single beat in the 19th century?
Well, we have the example of the Kunkel brothers, I think, that made an edition on Czerny Etudes that give, I think it's also on the channel. Then we have the Reger-Strauber case. So
that is so interesting. And I see in the comments that, that was debunked. I don't think so. You can't just say something is debunked and walk
debunked?
Away. Yeah, I actually emailed the author and he said that's not, he disagrees with that assessment.
I know? Because from that period, nobody had to say anything. They all lived happily with the metronomes of Reger and the metronomes of Sauber with a ratio of 1:2. So it's up to you to demonstrate that didn't make any sense at that time already.
Right.
What I will say, we have the novello metronomization on Mozart's church music. Novello traveled to meet Mozart's wife. The story is on on the channel as well. What else? I think I'm forgetting something. I mean, also Brahms. It's in that regard a peculiar case because his Requiem. I mean, we have to dive a lot into that, but we believe that could have been in single beat because you just see a different pattern in metronization. You just see that for the same tempi, he gives a note value that it's half of what he does for his instrumental works. And people then might say, yeah, but it's church music, it's slower. Yeah, I mean, granted that church music can be slower because of the acoustic, but not with a ratio of 1:2. That's something else.
Right. Yeah. There's just so much. I mean, to hear that there's zero evidence that's not a fair categorization at all. I think there's a lot of things that are weird and interesting and really should pique people's interest. I mean,
granted that there are things there are things that are difficult to explain and to put in the right context. For example, the question that you posed me on the glissando. That's a very interesting topic. But the point is that you don't take that to go back to point 0 and restore the problem. First, you find a solution to step number 1, and then you build everything up on that.
Yeah.
And when you don't know it, you just say it. I don't know it, and it's. I mean, also the thing of calculated durations, very interesting topic. But you always have to find the explanation that makes the most sense, rather than say, what do we have? The broken metronome. Beethoven didn't know how to read his metronome, and he read from below. And his all entourage didn't know anything. Schumann was crazy. He had schizophrenia. I don't know. Liszt composed for the aliens. I mean, we should
I remember that. Okay, so you talked so much about that, but then again, someone's going to come back at you. But look at your Hammerklavier, 1 hour and 20 minutes, and you don't even follow the metronome markings, Alberto.
True. It's true. I should have done a better job. That doesn't change anything.
And that was because the adagio, you took more liberties there.
Absolutely.
And was it mainly because of the adagio?
People will be surprised of how difficult it is to follow and to stick to a metronome number when you are building your interpretation. I'm telling you this, today is actually a great day because you know what? Today we are recording the last movement of the second movement of the second symphony of Beethoven, and it will be like the last movement before we complete the entire set of the 9 symphonies. But I have to tell you something else. Almost each symphony has been recorded at least twice. We have done 16 recordings. And why? Because the first recordings, we had struggled sometimes and we deviated from tempo. It's very easy. It's very easy to deviate from that, and it's very hard to stick to it. But guess what? When you hit that, it's just the world, the universe opens to you. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And that's how our work works and functions as well.
That's an emotionally source, right? You talked about in a video an emotionally source or some source where it is in fact okay, and in fact it's part of that style or part of that culture to interpret it with a bit more freedom in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like what you do with a metronome number, it's a little bit your responsibility. In the case of, especially of the symphonies, we thought like this music is composed for orchestra, and an orchestra cannot have such, you know, flexibility in tempo that when you are playing a sonata alone, of course. Yep. So let's stick to that. But moreover, what did I want to say? I just forgot. I mean, the Hammerklavier, of course, it was the first attempt, and people will just see now we are not public We are not putting on YouTube anymore recordings, but over the years there has been an evolution, because playing this way, Wim and I are pioneers in a way in this, and so we don't have anybody teaching us how to do that, and so we have to find solutions ourselves. And so guess what? The adagio of the Hammerklavier absolutely was not really precise, and that's why it has to be redone. And I've recorded now the Hammerklavier also a second time, and guess what? It was not good enough. So I'm going to do that a third time until I'm really happy. The version of the Fifth Symphony that you have there, it's our fourth version. 4 times. Just because in the last movement, we went from a half note 84 to half note 92. And that was enough to change a lot the character of the piece. People should see the other versions. They are not public, but you would hear immediately. And so if 10% of deviation from the tempo decided by the composer gives you such a feeling of, oh, what's happening? Can you imagine what would be like playing like 60% faster what we do today, and claiming that these composers will be fine with that? I don't think so. I'm not so sure about that. Needs to be seen.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I want to end off. I guess. I have one quick question. What do you think of your colleague Wolfgang Weller's recordings on YouTube?
So I haven't heard many of them, but like one that I listen a lot is the Beethoven symphonies, because he did the Liszt transcription. And actually, we got a lot of inspiration from him, because he has a way of playing that is quite stable in tempo. We'll say very, very German. Doesn't really apply to an Italian and a Flemish guy. Also, I mean, even though, like, I must tell you, in the couple, I'm the German guy, and he's the Italian one. So it's a little bit reversed. I'm like leashing him a little bit sometimes, and he follows. He will see this interview.
I love his channel.
He will
Wolfgang
not allow
Weller.
me in the house anymore.
I love his channel, and I'm glad. Like, if you want to listen to anything whole beat on the piano, go to his channel. He's pretty much covered most of the repertoire, like 2,000 recordings.
And especially I think he did quite some research on Liszt.
He was whole beat before it was cool, right? I mean, I think like he was.
Yeah,
he
records all stuff. It's very interesting what he does.
He did it. Did he do it independently? See, I would love to have him on the program. He kind of did. I wonder if he did it independently of his own, because. Some people. Yeah,
I think he works. He has been working. Been working on it by himself for I don't know how many years. It's just unbelievable what he does, and he does that also. I mean, he posts everything on YouTube, and does that also for himself. It's just what a true musician should do. Like do stuff for himself first.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his work, and I love listening to.
His Alkan stuff is quite impressive. Like the Alkan recordings, there are some etudes that, not easy at all.
Well, the great Alberto Sanna, sir, I mean, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and
pleasure is mine.
I'll get a lot of heat, but again, I'm interested in this, and honestly, people don't hold me to the same standard of research.
But it's good. It's good that there's so to say. I wouldn't say opposition, because we never had for us a real opposition is to see finally like somebody's playing everything in single beat, but we know that will never happen. But we are happy that people react so strongly to that, because it means that they care.
Yes,
they care too, and
so.
and that's the point of departure for a discussion. We all care.
We all care, and it's fine. It's fine. Let's discuss this, and I think people. They're welcome to comment and just keep it civil. That's all. Just keep it civil. All right. Well,
when it gets heat, I mean, we can take it. We are used to that. It's not a problem. The stakes are high, I will say.
Yeah. Well, the great Alberto, thank you for being on the show. How about maybe in some time in the future, we'll have women you come on and we could have a nice little panel.
We will be very, very happy to be the two of us together
and
again.
Keep recording. I love your recordings. I love your preludes, and
thank you.
Especially the first one, so beautiful. The first one, so good.
Sounds natural. Sounds like
the
Bach.
Somebody say though in the comments that you were not doing a polyrhythm correctly. Did you see that in that comment?
The polyrhythm correctly? It's possible. I should check again. And I don't remember how I played it, nor how it's written. I should check again if somebody had a point on that. Nice. I guess what I have to re-record the preludes again.
Yeah,
Wim will not be happy about that.
Yeah. Well, the great Alberto, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.